Last week we saw at the beginning of Acts chapter 27 that Paul, of course, was on a ship headed he's working his way toward Rome. Of course, the problem was, it was the absolute worst time of year to be on a ship. Paul had warned them about that. Starting kind of around verse 13 of 27, he tells them, we really shouldn't be going now. And maybe it's before that, we really shouldn't be going. Verse 13 is when the wind starts blowing. And it's the worst time of year. And he, as we'll say a civilian, he knew this, okay? And they didn't listen to him because they thought, this guy's from a landlocked town. What does he know? They're not seafaring people. They're desert wanderers, And so why would we listen to Paul? It makes sense. I mentioned that last week. It makes sense that you would not listen to Paul if you are an experienced sailor who thinks you can cheat the system and get by. But the truth is, they should have listened to Paul. That's what we're going to look at today. Why should they have listened? Because they end up making several mistakes. We're not going to look at them all. We're going to look at a few. They end up making several mistakes. Let me move that on. There we go. And in those mistakes, we find things that we absolutely can learn from. Because we make the same ones, don't we? We've all been too proud to listen to somebody because we didn't think they were an expert in what it was that we thought we were dealing with. And then we found out later, expert or not, should have listened. We also sometimes, there's sometimes where it's the other way around. We should have listened to the experienced person who knows what they're doing because that is their expertise, and we didn't, and then we learned later, should have listened. You notice there's a common denominator in there? You know what it is? It's not about expert or not expert. The common denominator is what? Should have listened, right? And sometimes we take a gamble. We're not sure which one to listen to. And so we just have to, go with our gut, which, by the way, we're going to talk about that. Sometimes that's actually not the thing to do. But we go with our gut, and so we find out, I guess should have listened, but to the other one, And we experience this all the time. And some of this is unavoidable. There are times in your life you're going to make the best decision with the best information you've got, with all of the experienced people telling you everything, or the inexperienced people telling you everything. You're going to still blow the decision every now and then. Not everything is predictable, but some things are. Sometimes we know what the consequences are of a particular decision. And sometimes we think we can outsmart the consequences. I guarantee you, that's not true. Most of the sins that you've committed, let's get into the heavier decisions, most of the moral failures that you have had in your life, you made those decisions knowing what you should and shouldn't have done, knowing the possible, likely, promised sometimes consequences, but you thought you could cheat the system. Right? We've all been there. We've all done it. There's not a one of us in the room innocent. I know this because the Spirit reveals it in the book of Romans chapter 3. He reveals it in Galatians and Ephesians and Colossians and Philippians and Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, everywhere, all over the Word of God. You will not find people who have not made this mistake except for one. That one, Jesus, is the only one who's ever had flawless decision-making skills. I know we all think we do. And sometimes we pick people who will tell us that we do. Those people are the last people to pick, but that's why we picked them, right? Yes people. We don't actually need yes people in our life. We need thinking, praying, wise, godly people in our life. And that we'll get to is what they really needed. And what do you know? God had actually put a godly, wise, praying person on the boat, right there in the middle of them, who was talking and saying what they needed to do and not to do. But did they listen? Well, no, if they did, we'd only have 27 chapters in the book of Acts, but we have 28. So let's go to that 27. There's a whole lot of not listening. Let's start. I'm going to go down. It would be good if my notes weren't upside down. I mean, it might not actually. It just means that I'll go down and then up and then down and up. You don't want to do that. Let's start around verse. You know what I want to do? I want to jump. I don't want to start at verse 13. Let's go down to 27. Let's read this together. It won't be on the screen. 27. That's probably what the screen says anyway. Where are we? I skipped that. See there? See there? Okay, if I can get my clicker together and synchronized, we'll get this. When the 14th night had come, and I'm already going to stop us. The 14th night. Stop and get on the boat with Paul for a second. I don't know how many of you have experience with being on a boat in the middle of a storm. I have no idea. If you ever rode in a 67 Impala, you know a little bit, especially a wagon, you know it's the same rock and roll when you go around corners as all of that, right? 14 days and nights. It has been storming. There was no peaceful time in this 14 days. Imagine that for a second. 2 weeks of rocking and rolling and all that comes with that. Now you think I'm about to get gross, but I'm going to reserve my one gross thing for something better than seasickness, okay? Because that's kind of easy pickings, isn't it? 14 days of that. What little sleep you get, you wake up from, hoping, but finding out very quickly, maybe because you rolled off of whatever you were sleeping on, that the waters are still rolling, and the lightning is still going, and the winds are still howling, and you are still sick and tired of being seasick and tired. 14 days of that. 14 days. On top of that, you know in 276 people, there's at least 274 whiners. Oh, good grief. 2 weeks. They were being driven across the Adriatic Sea. About midnight, the sailors suspected they were nearing land. So they took a sounding and found 20 fathoms deep water. A little farther, they took a sounding again, 15 fathoms. I said deep water. Deep if you're swimming. Not deep water if you're a sailor and it's getting... Did you notice how much it let up? So from 20 fathoms to 15 fathoms, that's pretty quickly getting shallower. And fearing that we might run aground on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. When you are at the point that all you can do is lay anchor and pray. Kind of the way they would do this. It talks about 4 anchors. That might not have been, I have no idea. May or may not have been 4 anchors at once. What they would kind of do is they would throw down an anchor, and then when the ropes would get too stretched, they'd throw the second anchor and cut the first one, and they would kind of do those in a sequential order. And we know this, not only from written history, but we know it because that's what they look for when they're looking for sunken Roman ships. They can find the line of here's an anchor, here's an anchor, here's an anchor, here's an anchor as they were going, and then they find anchor, 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 boat, right? And they're getting ready. We've got these 4 anchors left. So they throw them. You know what they've already done? This is just crazy. So think about 2 weeks of all this. Earlier in the text, it says that they had to tie the rope together. You know how they did that? It says they passed ropes around the boat. Imagine being in a storm. Picture the opening sequence of Gilligan's Island on a storm like that, because that's what we're talking about. Imagine being in that storm, I don't know, day or night, and they would have to send a guy with a rope tied around his waist out of the boat. Now, the water doesn't calm while you do this. The sun doesn't come up while you do this. Imagine how scary this has to be even for somebody who's done it before. You dive out under the boat, and you swim under the boat with the rope, and you come, hopefully, you come the other side of the boat. And then you get up, and they cinch that rope to hold the planks of the boat together. This is how desperate it is. To hold the planks and to give them some more structural integrity so your boat doesn't just break apart. And so they would do this multiple times, diving over with the rope, coming back, doing it again, doing it again, doing it again. When you are to the point that you are tying the boat together, it ain't good. Okay? And now you're down to your last 4 anchors. And that's not good. They get very, very desperate. They get this desperate. Let's keep going. I want to jump down. No, I don't want to jump. Let's keep going. Verse 30. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship. Okay, I'm going to stop again. When the sailors, the guys with experience, start abandoning ship, what do the civilians need to realize is bad? I think they probably already knew that, don't you? It's bad. It's bad for several reasons, one of which we will come back to. Unless these men, Paul tells them, stay on the boat, you cannot be saved. Why is that? Is it because they're such great sailors? Actually, no. There's something else that's going on here. They are not supposed to get off the boat. God has given Paul a message. If you stay on the boat, I'll save you. That's the promise. If you stay on the boat, if you ride through this, I will protect you. What is the flip side of that coin? And if you don't, all bets are off. Isn't that true of our boat as well? If you're faithful to me, you have this promise. If you are faithful to me, you have this promise. Now the flip side would also be true. If you abandon ship, then you've abandoned the promise. So Paul tells them, listen, God has promised that every single one of us will be saved through this. But you can't let these guys go. It's not because they're great sailors. I think they've already proven they may be good, but they're not infallible. They're not perfect, and they don't have the skills to handle this. All they can hope for is a decent crash landing where their skills are concerned, and they're giving up hope on their own skills for a decent crash landing. Paul's really kind of reminding them and us, we're not here to trust in our skills. Be faithful. He says, you've got to stay on the boat. We're going to make it, but you can't let these guys go. Verse 33, as day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day, and you have continued in suspense and without food. So now you know they were minor. And without food, having taken nothing, because they had to throw their provisions overboard a while back. Therefore I urge you to take some food, for it will give you strength, for not a hair is to perish from the head of any of you. Oh man, some of us didn't get that promise. And some of us done lost our heads, didn't we? And when he had said these things, he took bread, gave thanks to God, in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. And they all were encouraged and ate some food themselves. We were in all 276 persons on the ship, or in the ship. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. Now when it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on which they planned, if possible, to run the ship ashore. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea, and at the same time loosening the ropes that tied the rudders. Then hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the vessel aground. By the way, all those details are there, not so we learn how to sail, but part of what Luke is doing is telling the story, and part of what he is doing is testifying to the story. Sailors at the time would have read the detail and said, that is exactly the way we would have handled that in that moment. And it gives veracity to what Luke is testifying to. Striking a reef, verse 41, they ran the vessel aground, and the bow struck and remained immovable, and the stern was being broken up by the surf. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, it's always good to have people in the world on your side, even if they're not fellow believers yet, right? Thank God for people in the world who help us out, whether they are among us or not. Just a little side note. Paul benefited from that often. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, the rest on planks and on pieces of the ship. And so it was, this is a small sentence but important, and so it was that all were brought safely to land. Did God keep his promise? He did. It seems like just a small detail. God kept his promise. And I do believe that this is what Luke is ultimately testifying to, that he wants us to see. God keeps his promises. Paul is teaching them the gospel as they are going through this whole ordeal. There are all kinds of ways to teach the gospel. They don't all include a podium and a book. Many of them will include, how do you handle the things that you go through? How do you as a Christian display faith in a world that's going through difficult times, whether that's big stuff or just stuff in your own individual life, but that is still very big to you? How you handle it really matters. What are you teaching your kids? What are you teaching your grandkids about how to handle the things that are thrown at them in life? There are all kinds of parents. Some are awesome. Some are awesome but flawed. That's actually all of them. Awesome and flawed. And then, sometimes there are methods of parenting. I'm talking about the methods, not the people. There are methods of parenting that are less than favorable toward developing strong and resilient children. And not all of those come out of the hard circumstances or the abusive circumstances. That's like a whole other enchilada to deal with. But man, I want an enchilada. That hurt to say out loud. Anyway, squirrel, not a squirrel enchilada. Although, if things get really bad, I'm not above it. Okay, squirrel enchilada could happen. The kinds of parents sometimes that don't raise resilient and strong kids are parents who think they're doing everything well and everything right. Helicopter parents who just hover over the child and just try to prevent anything from happening at all. It sounds logical, it sounds great, it sounds wonderful. Some wear that not with, the badge of annoyance that most of us would give them as it's happening, but they wear it as a badge of honor that they're a helicopter parent. Yes, I fly over everything that they do. Yes, I'm going to make sure that I see everything. Yes, I'm going to fire rockets like an Apache if I need to. That's become a badge of honor. It often makes for really annoying parents, but that's how it's worn. The problem is, parents, you're not always going to be there to protect your child from everything. And if you've raised your child to only find their strength in your presence and protection, you've not taught them how to be an adult or a Christian. Why do I say both of those? An adult, because they need the strength to stand on their own, but they need their strength and their wisdom to stand on their own with Jesus. And if you cause them to trust in you more than Jesus, you've accidentally, I don't think anybody does this on purpose, or I hope not, but you may have accidentally taken the Lord's place in their life. You've made yourself an idol. The other kind of parent like that that's popular sometimes, I don't know, people sit around and talk about, I'm going to be that, but they just become that because it's some of our current cultural trends just kind of create some of these things, is the lawnmower parent. Are you familiar with a lawnmower parent? That's the one that goes out and cuts down all the grass and removes all the weeds and makes sure there are no stones in their child's way. They go before their child. It's like a helicopter parent on steroids. The helicopter parent reacts. The lawnmower parent is like, I ain't waiting for no reaction. I'm not going to wait until the teacher crosses my child. That's an ungodly squirrel just ran across my mind. I'm going to resist, although that's a whole sermon. Probably needs to be preached, but not by me because I'm too biased. Anyway, the lawnmower parent says, I'm going to go up there before school even starts. And I'm going to tell that teacher. I'm going to tell them what I'm like, because it's really not about the kid. I'm going to tell them what I'm like. I'm going to tell them what my expectations are. And I'm not talking about a parent who goes to the teacher and says, my child has this and this and this, and, I'm wanting to work with you and help you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the teacher who says, listen, my child is perfect, or the parent, my child is perfect, and if you don't treat my child like they are perfect, I guarantee you I will be up here. Every teacher is like, faces and names, right? Faces and names, right there. That's hard to deal with. I'm just going to tell you, if this is you, Lord bless your heart. But know that we're asking Him to bless it into repentance, okay? Because it's so bad. Again, I'm fighting for my child. Really, you're just kind of fighting, is what you are. It doesn't work. It becomes a mistake. Raise strong, resilient kids. Be strong, resilient people. But not because you are in control, because you're not. What did they learn this quick and often on this trip? You're not in control. The more you try to seek it, the more life will try to break that. Sometimes those breaks are coming from attacks by Satan. Sometimes God is trying to humble you and wake you up. But either way, you get broken. Just don't fall for that. Their mistakes, let's look at theirs for a while. Their mistake. The first one they make is that they just ignore the value of faith and patience. And I'm going to add to that, and good wisdom. Okay? They ignore those things. If they had trusted what Paul was saying at the very beginning, and I know that he must have been tempted. We don't have it, but I know he must have been tempted. Especially when he's having to stop them from escaping and stop them from killing all the prisoners. Well, the centurion stopped that. You know he had to be tempted to get up and say, I told you so. I told you all that those winds were going to blow. I told you that that's what month it was. And you knew this. And I reminded you. Because I know this, because what would we be tempted to say? I knew that was what was going to happen. But he doesn't. That we know of. He might have said, Luke, can you not put that in there? But you know he was tempted to have said that. We would be too. Because they actually had the wisdom there. They just didn't put their faith in it. They found reasons not to listen to the information they were getting that they needed to listen to. The godly, God-given, actually, in terms of the promise. Wisdom that they needed. They tried to kill the prisoners after they had heard the promise given in the vision that God was going to deliver them all. The decision to get off the boat was a lack of faith. The decision to kill the prisoners was a lack of faith. All of which were driven by fear, and that last one, a fear combined with pragmatism. It made sense to them to do it that way. They didn't want to wait it out. They didn't want to wait out the season. Sometimes you have to wait out seasons, real or spiritual. Spiritual is real, but you know what I'm saying. You have metaphorically seasons of our life. Sometimes you just have to wait. Be patient. Luke 18, keep praying. God is going to answer. Be patient. Everything in His time. And if they've done that, they wouldn't be going through this. So, don't ignore the value of faith. Trust the promise. And patience. And godly wisdom. Throw in that bonus one there. The second was this, which goes into not listening to godly wisdom. They took a vote. They took a vote. We're Americans, okay? And we're Texans. And that's what we like to do. Well, where are we going to go for dinner? Well, what do y'all want? How does that work in your car? Because I know how that works in my car. Congress decides on lunch faster than the people in my car. And when I say the people, I am not throwing my family under the bus because Tanya's going, James, that's... See, right now, I'm on this, no sugar whatsoever. No, I don't even miss it. But, no sugar whatsoever, no fried stuff whatsoever. I got witnesses, I promise. And all of that. And while doing all of that, do you know how hard it is if you want to go get lunch out? No, think of this. No or low carbs, and no sugar, and no fried in Brownwood or Early, Texas. If you don't think that's hard, I challenge you today for lunch. You're going to have a hard time even finding a salad you don't have to take stuff off in this town, I am just surprised that I haven't found deep fried lettuce yet at one of these restaurants. And my stepfather does like fried lettuce, and that just grosses me out. I don't know how that works, and I don't want to know. Sorry. I don't want to know, just in case he's watching. It's just not my thing. Ugh. I'm sorry, I thought about it again. I can see it in the pan. I don't want it. That is hard to do without those things. Because the majority has voted. And the majority in this town wants heart attacks. It's the thing, right? This is what we're, diabetes. Who was that guy, Wilbur Brimley? I want some diabetes. And this is clearly what the majority has voted for. Don't listen to the majority. The majority rarely picks the best choice. You're flashing in your head going, yeah. I don't even have to illustrate, do I? We don't have to illustrate. Don't listen to the majority. Who are you going to listen to? Oh man, y'all don't know yet? I got to change my outline. Who are you going to listen to? God. Thank you, God. I was thinking Jesus, but single syllable, that also works. It's the same team, right? You're going to listen to the Lord. Then it's whichever one you think I'm talking about. See what I did there? Listen to the Lord. Listen to His wisdom. Go to those who have a godly influence on you. That's what they had in the boat with them. Some of those guys didn't yet have a connection with God. I bet you some of them did by the time this is all over. But they had a guy who did. And they were learning as they went. You know, he might be onto something. It took them a while. They were slow learners. We are too. We're not looking at mistake number 1 and done. Let's go to number 3. Don't listen to the majority. Mistake number 3. And again, this is even all they made. They got selfish. I'm going to go back to the parenting thing for a second. Raising your kids. Raise your kids not to react, and this is hard because this is so natural, not to react to difficulty and challenges, failed papers, with selfishness. Because that is our natural inclination. That is the move of the flesh by a fallen people, that we just instinctively always go. I mean, I understand there are times in fear, sometimes that's self-preservation, and it's not necessarily nefarious at all, it's neutral. But when those instincts kick in, we have a choice which direction we go with them. When we respond to hardship, tragedy, abuse, difficult situations, diagnoses, all those things, there is a different way to choose. That we react is going to happen. That we react defensively is going to happen. But you can react defensively, survival mode, in godly ways and ungodly ways. Choose carefully and teach your kids and your grandkids how to make those choices. Just like words, you know, Jesus said, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Same thing with pressure and your reactions to pressure. It can only be what's already within you that's going to come out. So work before the trouble comes to create in your kids self an unselfish heart so that your natural reaction is unselfish. We had those people. We saw a lot of those people a couple of weeks ago with all of the fires going on, whose instinct was, how can I help? That's good parenting, isn't it? People raise their kids to have the natural instinct. What can I do? What do you need? How can I help? You know, people loaning trailers and trucks, going and hauling people's livestock out of harm's way. It's just an example. There are people who react 2 different ways. You got the helpers and you got the looters. Be careful which one you raise. Be careful which one you raise. Don't get selfish when those times come. They did. They were ready to just jump off the boat. Hey, we're not all on the same boat. You know, people start arguing, we are too in the same boat. No, we're not in the same boat. You know, because they were mad that people in Hollywood were saying, why don't you give toward this? Well, you can be totally mad at Hollywood for being hypocritical like they were. That's not a problem. But it doesn't change that we are all actually in everything, life and everything the same. They were quite physically, literally in the same boat. Were they all approaching life the same way? No. Did they have the same principles and beliefs? Clearly not. Paul wasn't trying to kill anybody. Were they in the same boat? Yes. Did God say that they needed to work together like they were? He actually did. But there was a way to do that that was godly, and there was a way to do that that was ungodly, and he expected the godly to not pretend they weren't in the boat with everybody else either. He tied Paul's salvation to caring for the ungodly men on that boat. Isn't that something? That's really important, because it's not all about us. That promise came with that tie. You've got to be faithful, and you've got to look out for each other. This is not going to be just about you. When we face hardship, the temptation is to make it, it's instinct again, all about us. It's not. It's not all about us. We're going to look at the resurrection here next week. And you know that resurrection wasn't just about any one of us either. It was about everyone we know and beyond. God never wanted us to make Christianity selfish and just about us. So the course correction is we start seeing everything we go through as about us. The world is addicted right now to pronouns. They're making some up. I'm not getting into that. They're making some up. I'm just going to tell you right now. Christianity is too. We sing too much the I and the me. And it is us. It is we. And the faith has always been that way. We are all in this together. Second is this. Peace does come. But peace doesn't come just magically, automatically. God, please just straighten it all out. It's just all straightened out. We want that peace be still moment that scared the disciples. But far, far more often, it comes through faithfulness. The promise was not, trust me, and I'll do away with the wind and the waves. The promise was, you will get through this storm. Through this storm. And you will make it. And I will lead you through. And that is our promise too. He says in Hebrews, repeating an Old Testament promise, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. And he won't. He won't. But that peace will come through our faithfulness, through some very difficult and trying times. That is life. We need to raise our kids to understand that's going to be life. I can't make every problem for my girls go away. Wish I could. Don't you know I wish I could? But I can't. But I can point them to the one who will be with them even when I can't be there. Who will be with them even when I am long gone. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. But that's where they need to have their anchors in Jesus. And number 3, I love this image. This might seem like not one of the important details. I love this. I think this is a huge part of how we fix all those mistakes and find healing and peace and strength through what we go through. Before it's all over, he says, it's been 14 days, and guys, you hadn't had much to eat, or anything to eat for a few days at least. You need to eat. And he calls them together to like a love feast. The language is so weird, it's almost Lord's Supper-like language. Go back and read it again. It's weird. It says, he calls them together, he encourages them, they pray, and they broke bread. And it uses, Luke knows, uses on purpose the same language from Acts chapter 2, verses 47 and 48. And every day they came together and they broke bread and they prayed, and it's the same language. They had church on the boat right quick. Why? Because they needed church on the boat together. Didn't put it there, but after every one of those, there ought to be a together. They broke bread together. They prayed together. They encouraged one another together. And the waters didn't stop. The winds didn't stop. The storm did not slow down. And yet, you read it again, and you can feel the peace that came. Look at it again. Look at this passage. We'll close with this. Let's see here. There it is. Verse 35. And when he had said these things, that not a hair would perish, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. And then they were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship. And when we had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. You can feel it, can't you? Prayed, ate, tossed it overboard, and trusted. Now, some of them have a relapse of a lack of faith after this. And they decide, well, maybe we need to kill the prisoners, so that all gets straightened out. God delivers them. You think he'll do that for you? You do these 3 things, his promise is sure. Trust him. Stay faithful. And this, break bread with your brothers and sisters. Pray, not just by yourself, with your brothers and sisters. Encourage one another. Build each other up, as in fact you are now doing, quote Hebrews. Need God's promise to deliver you.
is absolutely certain. Let's pray together.